Hi again, I'm Sahil Mansouri, CEO and co-founder of Bravado, and today I'm honored to be joined by America's leading authority on referral sales, my dear friend and author of two books on sales, and runs a website called No More Cold Calling, Joanne Black. Joanne, welcome to the Future of Sales.
Well, I'm looking forward to the future because we have nothing to do with the past, can we? We can't change it.
That's so right. That's so right. So, Joanne, before we get into it, I'd love for you to just give a little bit on your background, and kind of the platform that you're building and the work that you've done in elevating the craft of sales.
My entire career has been in sales and sales management, and I never thought I'd be in that career, but I have been. And I started No More Cold Calling in 1996 after I had worked for a couple different consulting and training firms. And I began it not thinking I'd be focused on referral sales. I really didn't think that at all. I just wanted to consult around sales and sales strategy. And actually my very first client, who was a referral, was doing a customer satisfaction survey at that time. And it was a fax back, several rounds. And on the last round, I added a question. I said, would you be willing to be a referral to this company? Now, they surveyed 50 of their best clients. Now, the scale was a 1 to 7. 7 was high, and the results came back 6.5. So 50 of their best clients said, oh, sure, I'd be glad to refer you. Were they asking? No. So that gave me the aha. Wait a minute. I knew that my best business had come from referrals. So what I did is I started asking a lot of sales people and sales leaders I knew, do you like to get referrals? Oh, we love them. It's the best business. We're pre-sold. They trust us. Our sales process shortens. We don't have competition. We convert well more than 50% of the time. There's no cost to sales, et cetera, et cetera. So then I asked the next question. Well, then, do you have a systematic, disciplined referral process with metrics, skills, and accountability for results? Well, you can guess the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. In 1996, it was 2 letters, no, and it's the same today. So there's this gap, right? On the one hand, we love it. On the other, yeah, of course we get referrals from time to time, but it's not the way we work every day. And so I had to figure out what gets in the way, what's the problem here, and so I developed a system to close that gap.
Amazing. So, Joanne, your story is, I think, at once very interesting and at once very, very common, which is to say there are a countless number of sales teams and sales leaders who know that referrals are your best source of new leads, right? And referrals are so powerful, but there's a few points where I think there's some disagreement. I think, first of all, the definition of what is a referral varies from company to company. I think the strategy of how to get referrals is most often absent inside of companies. And then what replaces referrals is a army of SDRs and BDRs that are weaponizing calling and emailing and trying to beat buyers into taking a meeting with an account executive, which has been universally panned, I think, by every buyer I've ever spoken to. So why don't we kind of break down these 3 steps, and why don't we start by trying to get a definition of what exactly is a referral? How do you define it?
My definition, and I stick to it, is a referral means you receive an introduction. So that person knows you, expects to hear from you. They know the business reason they're talking to you, and it's the one-call meeting. That's it. You get the introduction, you get the meeting. Could be a phone call, or it could be an in-person meeting, it could be a video chat, whatever. Now, there's a lot of disagreement about that. So I say there's no such thing as a warm call. And when that's been posted on social, oh my gosh, the conversations that go from that. Because I define cold outreach, which could be phone, email, or social, as contacting someone who doesn't know you and doesn't expect to hear from you. It doesn't matter how much research you've done. You've done their trigger events. You've come up with a phenomenal subject line. It doesn't matter. They don't know you. They don't expect to hear from you. Your outreach is ice cold, and the research shows it can take 8 to 15 touches to reach someone. Now, really, why? When you get the introduction, you get a one-call meeting. That's the definition.
Okay, so I think the concept of a one-call meeting is highly desirable to the vast majority of salespeople, sales leaders, even buyers, I'm sure would appreciate that. And yet that is by far not the industry standard. Where is the gap? What are we missing?
How much time do you have?
Hit me, Joanne. I got all day.
Well, we're missing a lot of things. So that's what I had to figure out when people said great business. On the other hand, yeah, we get them, but it's not systematic. So there's a lot of things that are missing, and basically 5 things. The first is it must be a strategy. The leadership, senior sales leadership, must put that proverbial stake in the ground and say, referral selling will be our number one outbound prospecting strategy. Mm-hmm. Now, people get a little freaked out when I say that, but what it means is, the other things you're doing stay the same. You have a social media strategy, you have your blogs, your webinars, your website, your podcast, everything you're already doing. But instead of dialing for dollars, so to speak, that that referrals, when you're asking, will get you the business you want. And this is mainly for account executives who need to develop relationships. Internal teams, typically it's more transactional. Okay, so number 1, strategy. Number 2, metrics. We need to be able to measure referral activities as well as results, right? Because revenue, which is the result, is a lagging indicator. We can't manage to revenue, but we can manage to activities. Mm-hmm. So referral activities, we need to agree on what they are, and we typically would back into that number. But it would be the number of people we're going to ask every week. And then the number of referrals we receive, the number of referral meetings we schedule, the number of referral meetings we conduct, and then it would typically go into the CRM as an opportunity and nurture whatever you need to do with it. So if we agree, let's do a little math here. If we agree is that referrals, when we're introduced to our decision maker, to the right people, become clients minimum 50% of the time. Typically more, but 50% is easy math. And so say in a year, I need to get 10 new clients. Do any multiple of it or cut it in half, it doesn't matter. It depends on whether you're talking about an SMB space, enterprise. And so if I need to get 10 new clients, you might think, well, I just need to ask 20 people. Well, no, we don't need to ask 20 people. We need to ask 40 or more. And here's why. Because many times you will get directly to the decision maker. Sometimes it's somebody in between, because you always go where the relationship is. So Sahil, if you said, well, I don't know such and such person at this QZP company, but I do know George there, I can introduce you to George. I want to talk to George first, because then I can get a lot of intel, right? Mm-hmm. And I can find out so many things. Actually, this just happened this morning. I was introduced to someone, and we had this great chat, and he had invited the VP of sales to be on the call. He wasn't. But the gentleman I talked to, we had a 30-minute call. By the way, it went an hour. And he came up with other ideas I had never thought about, that it just blew my mind about what the work we could do together that was really aside from what I could do with a sales leader. So we did 2 things at the end of that call. One, he set a calendar for next week to talk to the sales leader with him. And 2, I'm going to be in his city in a couple weeks, and we're going to meet in person. And it turns out where I'm going to be, listen to this, is around the corner from his office. Wow. So I'm just going to walk around the corner, serendipitous, yes, but specific, yes. So that's how it happens. So we could say 40 people, but I'd say to be safe, I want to look at 60. Mm-hmm. and knowing we might have a few interim steps there.
Sure.
So if we have those interim steps, it's going to take us a little longer, but we're still building those relationships along the way. And that's what it's about. So say we talk to 60 people and say that 20 of them say, you know, I'd be glad to help you, but I really can't think of anyone right now. When that happens, it's a couple things. I mean, they're not ready for the conversation. Sometimes they don't even know, but they may truly not be able to think of anyone, or we haven't been specific enough in who we're asking for, or haven't done our research beforehand to find out who some of their connections are. But say that 40 people agree to introduce you. Well, with a 50% conversion rate, that's your 20 new clients. So 60 would be a minimum, but my goal, even though I don't need 20 new clients in a year, my goal is to ask 2 people every week. Because buyers don't always work on our timeline.
Sure.
I mean, I have people who've made introductions, and I always get a response because they've been introduced by someone they know and trust. I always get a response. And, you know, somebody was in a new job, somebody was doing extensive traveling, and we will talk. But, you know, it may not be tomorrow. There was someone else I was introduced to. I spoke to him the first time, I think it was in January. We again, 30-minute call, went an hour. He was in the middle of doing plans. Referrals, hadn't thought about it. He says, I need to. Sent him my books. We talked again. And he said, I'm building my plan and I will have it ready next month. And let's talk again now, because he had to do certain things first. You know, we need to go where the buyer is, not where we are. So metrics. First, strategy. Second, metrics. Third is skills. Referral selling is a skill. It's a behavior change for how to ask. Fourth is accountability. So unless people are accountable, there's no behavior change. And then fifth is reinforcement and coaching, because without that, don't even start. So those are the 5 steps: strategy, metrics, skills, accountability, and reinforcement and coaching. With those 5, then people shift from the way they're working to making referral selling the way they work every day.
I love it. And I think that having such a programmatic approach to it is really important, especially in today's day and age where, you know, most sales leaders and sales teams are so reliant on process, right? I think that we have become more and more methodical in the way that we approach selling. And so when you are asked to do something that is outside of the bounds of what you normally do, AKA I'm normally sitting down and firing off 100 cold emails, and then I'm making 100 cold calls, and then I'm the next day writing 100 cold emails, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then by the way, go get a referral. Then people are like, well, yeah, that sounds great, and maybe I'll ask someone. But then there is no structure to it, right? And I think that that's what makes it really tough. And so I love that you have a process behind it. I'd love to ask one question though, which I think it has come up a number of times when we've been discussing referrals, both you and I, and also within the Bravado community. What do you do if you don't have a ton of clients already? So I think, you know, going back to your math and your example, you're saying, okay, you want to ask 2 people a week. Is that 2 customers already? What if you're a small startup and you only have 10 clients? Or what if you're a new account executive and you don't have a ton of relationships yet? How do you get the snowball rolling down the hill when you know, maybe you don't have such a big client base to start with?
It's not just clients. I mean, and so I'm going to give you an opposite example. I have a client I'm working with now, and it's a segment of a larger company. And they somehow got it in their heads. They thought of referrals as within their business unit. So, you know, this one is doing some kind of consulting, and there's like 3 or 4 different types of consulting. And if I'm a consultant in there in one thing and I hear a need for another, I'll refer it. So they thought of it as internal referrals. They never even thought of it as, oh my gosh, we can ask our clients. We can ask our network. We can ask everybody we know. So clients are important. And so what's happened is, even when we have an established network of clients, I ask people, have you asked every single person you've connected with during the buying process for a referral? Answer's always no.
Of course.
You know, they're thinking, oh, it's just the big honcho, right? But we all have relationships, and we don't know who people know until we ask. So that's huge. Now, if you're new to a company or a startup, you've been at other places. You have previous clients. You have lots of relationships. And this is a nuance, and it's really important. People refer you, not your company. So, Sahil, you did other things before. You've started a new company now. It doesn't matter what company you work for. They know you and trust you and like you. So they're going to refer you, because when we give a referral, our reputation's on the line. That I need to know, when I refer you, you're going to take care of my contact as I would. And if I know that, and I know you, and you have integrity, and you will follow up, I know you wouldn't have joined this company unless they were good and did good work. It's you. It's not the company. And that's a really important distinction.
Okay, so I love that, right? Because that is our mantra at Bravado as well, is the fact that the personal reputation of the salesperson is as critical as the reputation of the product and the service. And I think that one of the things we have tried to do, and when I say we, I mean the modern sales industry that has really kind of become digitized over the course of the last 5 to 7 years, with the prevalence of, sales automation platforms and all these other kind of tools and things that have become, widely adopted across sales teams, is that we have automated the humanity away. Right, we have automated. We have tried to create it doesn't matter who is on the other end of the line. It's just yet another salesperson at, Salesforce or Marketo or whatever. And I'm not picking on any one company, but generally speaking. And in fact, the other thing that I see is this wide adoption of the concept of territories and named accounts, which is to say that I have these 100 accounts that I need to work. And those 100 accounts are the only ones that I can work. And now if I get intro to a 101st account and it's from someone I know well who connects me to somebody, but that account isn't in my name, now I have to give that contact and that relationship up to whomever is assigned that account. And I have always felt like it creates a really poor incentive structure, in the sense that at that point, I'm better off just cold calling the crap out of the 100 companies that are in my name, because if I get intro to someone else that's not in that group, then I'm going to have to give up the account. I'm not going to get to work it. And it feels very buyer unfriendly. I can see why we want to do it as a sales team, because it creates structure and it's like really clean, dividing of territories and stuff. But would you agree with me that it doesn't set up the right incentive for long-term relationship building between buyers and sellers?
It doesn't. So I think as an organization, they need to look at that. And organizations handle it differently. So some would say, so you got an introduction to someone else's account. Mm-hmm. And so some organizations would say, take it and run with it, and then give the other account executive another one of yours, which you could give up. So that could happen. Or they may decide that that the other AE will get a %. They'll get something. Mm-hmm. There's all different ways of working it. And sometimes accounts are assigned based on proximity, so based on the relationships you have and not on geography. Mm-hmm. So it's, it really means the organization needs to step back and rethink their territories and their strategy. But here's the other thing, that when you're asking for a referral, if you have these 100 accounts, you want to find people who know people in those accounts. Mm-hmm. So I think the one that might be the 101 might be the rogue, and you don't want to make it an everyday thing, right. Unless the organization is set up that way, that you could get introductions to whomever, right? And whenever you do, it's your account. I mean, that's another way of working. But most organizations are set up that way. So you really need to know what will work and what won't in your organization.
I would say that, just drilling into this topic a little bit more, because I think it's one that we hear a lot at Bravado is, oh, I want to use your service in order to get more referrals, but I'm worried that I'm going to get intro to an account and then that account's going to be in someone else's name. I I guess, and maybe just call me curmudgeonly about this, but I don't understand why it is that we have such an obsession with territories. I totally get why we do it from the standpoint of the vendor, right? Like as the VP of sales, I have 50 sales reps, I have 100 sales reps. I need to give them all equal fair share and an opportunity to make their quota. So I'm going to assign 100 accounts each, and then I'm done with my territory planning. So it's easy operationally, but I also think that it is really painful to create an incentive structure that is, if I build a great relationship with the buyer at Coca-Cola, and the buyer at Coca-Cola is really good friends with the buyer at, I don't know, Georgia Pacific, but Georgia Pacific is not one of my accounts. So then I'm not going to be as incentivized to go and get that referral. Overall, that just hurts the business, right? Because the relationship is, and again, you touch on this, Joanne, which I think is so true, is that the relationship is between two people, not between two companies. Although there is a formal relationship between the companies, there's a personal relationship between the people. And while you can transfer the trust of the company, you can't transfer the trust of the person. And I think that is the thing that I find to be difficult in the way that we have organized sales today, is that if I have a good relationship with you and you say, okay, I'm going to introduce Sahil to this person, you're recommending me. But then if I'm not the person on the phone and it's somebody else, then it just feels like it rings a little hollow. No, am I off base with that?
No, there's a couple things. Yeah, I want to split this up into two pieces or maybe more. That you do have the relationship, so you need to broker the introduction. You need to be there, maybe even in person, and introduce the person, the AE who's going to be servicing the account. Okay. I actually had this when I was working with another company, and I was leaving the company, and I met with my clients, and she said, I want to work with you. And if you hand this off to someone else and I don't know them, that won't play with me. Right. So I introduced the new account executive. I was there with him. They built a relationship. That's the way it goes. So that has to happen. But also in that case, a company should be structured. And here's the other thing. The AE who has Georgia Pacific and had them for a while knows the company, knows how the company works, knows the inside and out. So they're really even better equipped than you would be to deal with a company. And so, but you should get a percent because this AE would not have had the business unless you'd brokered the introduction. So, you could make a play for having the account. That would be up to you. It depends how, if the AE just was assigned that account and had no relationship, you could certainly, make a case for why that account should be yours. But if the AE had been working with this account, maybe in other divisions for a while and really was entrenched in the company, then I think it really should be that AE's, but you should get a percent.
That totally seems fair. I feel like, when you describe the way to do it, it feels very simple. And it feels like there's common sense that can be used to do it. And yet I see this fear of creating chaos, right? And not wanting to muck the water so much. But let's talk about the other side of this and back to your website and a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is cold calling and cold outreach and mass emailing. So first, before I even offer anything, I'd love to hear your perspective. What do you think of the rise of the SDR and the use of dialer software and mass email tools and hyper personalization, this and that you see in the world today?
Well, there's no such thing as personalization when it's digital. I mean, that's my perspective. You can choose content that might be the most relevant to them or whatever. But, the fact is SDRs and BDRs are here. They have a role. People tell me they're very successful. And there's companies that work with those teams to work with them on understanding the buyer so that they're equipped to have a conversation. But I think what's happened is that because of the SDR group that's setting appointments for the AEs, that AEs have a tendency to sit back and just wait, right? And now I see the pendulum swinging back a little bit because they're saying, this is really the job. If I'm a salesperson, it's my job to generate my own qualified leads. And yes, I'll get some from marketing, I'll get some from the SDRs, but I have relationships and I cannot abdicate my responsibility to sell. And the first part of selling is prospecting. So my job is to get those referral introductions through the relationships I have. And there's so many relationships everyone has. So that, and the thing is, most of the messages from SDRs are intrusive. I'm going to tell you something that happened just before we got on the phone. Sure. So I'm working with a team, training a team on referral selling. And it was yesterday. We had our virtual session. And I talked about, I said, I don't know what's happening, but every day there's more and more, must be 10, 20 a day I get of these emails that are just totally cold, have nothing to do with me. By the way, I didn't attend your conference. I didn't stop by your booth. I don't want your software or whatever. And now twice I had people leave a message on my website, which was pitching their product. So this person who's in the class copied me on an email. I hope he BCC'd me on an email that he sent to this person who was trying to sell him some kind of software. And what the person in the class said, he said, I don't work from cold calls, cold emails. I only work through referrals, so your software has no use for me. It was just like that. I mean, he bothered to respond, which I thought was very funny. But that's it. But it's not their fault. Somebody's making them do it. They have to make X number of dials a day, send X number of emails a day, and something's going to stick. When it takes 8 to 15 touches, that's what they do day in and day out. And that's part of the reason sales gets a bad name. And that's part of the reason there's burnout, because many times in companies, there's not a career path, and these are typically young people out of college. And I think it's a brutal introduction to sales. I really do.
Yeah, I do as well. And I think that having built and run multiple sales teams at venture-backed startups throughout the Valley, and having been a salesperson myself, I would dare say that I didn't understand just how intrusive and just how annoying it was until I left the world of sales. So I had somewhat of a unique career in that I started in sales and marketing and I ended up on the product side. And when I became a buyer, I all of a sudden realized that all of the tactics and all of the things, the tricks and the stuff that we would use are just so annoying. And I use the word annoying because I'm not annoyed by products. I'm annoyed by the people. And that's the part that was really eye-opening for me, was that I would get like this deluge of emails from vendors that I knew, products that I had used. And I was left with a worse impression of the company than when I had no outreach or no contact before. And if that person had just bothered to reach out to somebody that I knew, or the person I knew at the company had reached out, or there had been that bridge of trust between me and that person, it would have made all the difference in the world. Because it gives context and it gives some trust in the relationship. I don't think you can build a relationship with somebody by banging down their door. I mean, sure, occasionally it works. I'm not saying that it's completely ineffective. I think it works. But I think that the amount of accounts that you burn and the number of relationships that you'll never get by doing this is really hurting a company's ability to maximize its TAM and maximize the revenue that they can generate.
No, I agree. But, we're not going to eradicate it. So it's just the way it is. And some people say they're really good at it. So I go, well, fine. If you're good at it and it works, keep doing it. Really. That's people have told me, oh, I'm really good at it. Well, go ahead and be good at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But some people are good at it, but they still want to find a better way, and they want to work through referrals because they see it as a better way. But, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and the presenter outlined this whole presentation was about getting qualified leads in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. And he presented a process, very specific of things people could do every day, but it was geared to SDRs. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him, I said, do you apply the same process to account executives? And he said, yes. No account executive is going to follow that detailed process of X number of dials. Mm-hmm. So people are thinking SDRs. Mm-hmm. And they're not thinking about the power of the relationships that account executives have.
That's exactly right. And maybe I take a more cynical point of view on the role of the SDR than you do, because I think you said, we're not going to eradicate it. I don't know if that's true. I would say that we as salespeople have learned that whatever our buyer wants, whatever is going to get us customers, is what we're going to do. And what we realized is that somewhere along the way, we realized that writing a personal email was far more likely to get you a meeting than sending a marketing email, right? That we knew. And we realized that making a phone call was more likely to get you a meeting than just sending an email. That was something that we knew. And then what we started doing was we started weaponizing those two mediums against our buyers. And we started bombarding them with a arsenal of emails and calls. I can't even tell you how many. Are you stuck under a rock? Did you get eaten by an alligator? Did you, some shitty line like that. I get one a week still. To this day, I get one a week. I'm sure you do as well. And the thing that it makes me realize is that every salesperson's willing to do whatever it is that they think is going to work. So if buyers stop responding to cold outreach, and if buyers stop responding to cold calls, and there's a way to just stop the success of that, then people will adapt and people will change. And I'm not saying that SDRs are a bad thing. In fact, I've managed SDRs. I've hired SDRs. It is not that I have anything against SDRs. It's that I don't like the fact that buyers are being inundated with this type of, faux personal messaging, such to the point that if I get a warm intro to somebody and I don't need, and let's say, I ask you for an introduction to someone, you say, yes, okay, I'll give you an intro to that person. I have to rely on you to send that email, because if I sent an email and said, hey, Joanne said you and I should chat, that person's going to assume that I'm lying, because every other outreach they get is something like that that's like fake. It's only if you write the email that the person will even believe that there is an intro, because of all of the lying that happens. Oh, I was on your website and I saw this. Oh, I saw you. And it's just all fake. None of it's real. I can't tell you how many emails I get that say, I went to your careers page and I saw that you were hiring for this role. I don't have a careers page, right? So I don't think that you did, right? And it's just like, it's just so frustrating to me that we have made it acceptable to lie to the market, to try and pretend like we actually to try and simulate a relationship. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do know what you mean. And speaking of referrals, is when people offer a referral, I always say, would you like me to write a little blurb for you? And typically, I'd say 95% of the time they say yes. The 5% of the time, the couple times that they said, I'm fine, and they copied me on the intro, it was not what I would have said at all.
Mm.
So I decided I write the intro. And when I write the intro, like I did, I sent one to you, Sahil, then you can put it in your own words, or bookend it, put an intro and a close or whatever you want to do with it, but you've got the core. And by the way, that email is short and it describes the business reason for the introduction. Has to be a business reason. So people will refer you, let me back up, they will offer to help you because they like you, but they won't introduce you just because you're a nice person.
Mm-hmm.
They'll introduce you because there's a valid business reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then they look good as well, because you have to remember the person who's making the introduction, their reputation's on the line.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to make a good introduction for a solid business reason. I never really thought about this fact that buyers think we're lying all the time. I can see that because why do I get all these emails that said, you've been to our site, you've done this and that I've never done? So, that's a possibility. But, some of this is ancient history. When I was selling enterprise, I didn't have SDRs,
Mm-hmm.
And there's this perception that you're either, a hunter or a farmer. And I managed the sales team and a couple times. And one of the guys was definitely a farmer. And I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to manage him differently. He had these wonderful relationships. He could call up his clients, go visit and schmooze. They loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Loved him. I mean, he was a very tall, cute guy, so the women really loved him too. but I mean, he just was charming. He was delightful. So then from a management standpoint, I needed to manage him differently. But, we did all of that ourselves. We didn't have SDRs. So why is it that we have to have this group of people today? I don't know. I really don't. I think we've just gone one from here to all the way to this end. And at some point, the pendulum's going to swing back.
Of course. I totally agree. And again, like I said, I understand why as a sales leader, I would think that hiring an army of SDRs is going to be a smart business decision because I can afford more of them. They can do all the grunt work that the account executive who I'm paying 2 to 3 to 4 times the salary of the SDR to doesn't need to waste their time, doing outreach. But I think again, if we look at the efficacy rates of send 100 emails, get 3 responses, that's a win. That's a good campaign. What about the other 97? And then they'll say, oh, well, they didn't even read it. They didn't look at it. No, they saw it, right? Because every email that comes through, you see, and you saw that you yet again got spammed by somebody that you didn't want to talk to. And now I've got a negative perception of this company's brand in my head. And that does have long-term ramifications because I know the vendors that are overly aggressive, and I know the vendors that are disrespectful of the buyers and the customers that they're trying to interact with. And I also know the ones that are not, and the ones that are respectful in their outreach and that do really put in the effort to build a relationship. And they have markedly different results. I mean, how many SDRs did Slack have when it was growing its business? There's a reason why Slack didn't have a ton of SDRs. It's because they focused on product and they focused on customer success and they focused on building things that were widely beloved by teams, and they figured out how to make a viral loop around it. And by the way, they do have a massive sales team now, but they already have built a brand as being customer first. And I think that is the thing that many startups miss, is that they're like, it's always been you build a great product and then you market it. And today we market the crap out of it and then hope we build a great product tomorrow, and I think that it's just like everything about what we're doing is very short-term focused, which is why there's so many flash in the pan type startups that come in and everyone thinks it's going to be the next big thing. And then it's just not, because they don't focus on customer success. They don't focus on long-term relationships. They don't focus on onboarding. They don't focus on long-term results of their clients. It's just on to the next, on to the next, and on to the next. And we celebrate short-term revenue without thinking about long-term churn. I think that that's like a very common thing.
So here's another aspect to referrals. So what happens a lot is, so I'm an AE. I've gotten great relationships during my sales process. I closed the deal, I hand it off to customer success, and then I go on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Well, I've missed this opportunity to continue to build relationships with these buyers, to ask them for referrals. So the system is set up just really weird, that it doesn't support continuing those relationships with the AE who had them in the first place and whoever was on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's another thing that I found is that many companies set up, like, renewals are handled by a completely different team than the initial deal. And again, for the sake of like simplicity and vendor efficacy and whatnot, makes total sense. But every time you pass the customer on to a customer success rep, all you're doing is you're weakening the ties between the company and the customer, and over time, that's one of the reasons why, churn rates have gone up. It's, every company is facing the same epidemic. They can't retain their people. They can't retain their customers. And this is just becoming more and more common. And I think that the thing that companies are doing in response to it is they're hiring more people and they're trying to get more customers instead of trying to, it's like filling a leaky bucket. And it just doesn't make sense to me why we don't focus on long-term relationships and focus on, to this day, many of the relationships I built at Glassdoor and Meltwater and whatnot, I'm still friends with many of those customers. And in fact, many of those people that I used to work with are the people who I'm reaching out to today, 6 years, 7 years later, who are introducing me to their sales team so that we can spread Bravado. When speaking about the power of referrals, the reason that we built Bravado as a system based on reputation and referrals is because I have personally experienced the power of it and understand that this is really important work. And Joanne, this is one of the things I'm so happy to have met you. How did we meet? By referral, right? Like I was talking to Todd McCormick, who's the CRO at Terminus, and he and I had gotten connected because I knew Sangram, who's the CMO at Terminus, and so I reached out to Sangram. Sangram connected me to Todd. Todd and I spoke, and then he was impressed with what we were doing. Said, "Oh, you should talk to Joanne. Introduced me to you." This is how business is done. This is how every CEO raises venture money. This is how every great salesperson cracks accounts. And yet, it's just an afterthought in the majority of transactions in the majority of sales teams, and it's a big miss. It's a big miss, I think.
Well, in addition to being an afterthought, I've had a couple people tell me in the last few months that it wasn't even on their radar. They never even thought of it. But the reason that referrals work so well, the reason they're so important, is because they address these challenges that every sales leader says. Okay, the biggest challenge is getting qualified pipe. All right, everybody says, how do I get qualified leads into the pipe? Sure. Well, how do you do that, right? You get it with a referral introduction. Mm-hmm. How do I get my salespeople to get meetings at the right level? You get that with a referral. How do we shorten the sales process? You get that with a referral, because prospecting time goes like that, just collapses. And how do I get more clients faster? The conversion rate, minimum 50%, more likely higher. So all of that, because it addresses the challenges that sales leaders and sales teams face. Otherwise, maybe it wouldn't matter. But that's age old. That hasn't changed, except there's more and more and more focus on qualified pipe.
I love it. Now, last thing I want to touch on before we let you go, because you've been so generous with your time here, Joanne, is perhaps the one thing that I hear over and over again. I want to get more referrals, but I'm worried about asking because it feels like I'm asking for a personal favor from my customer. And so because of that, I'm nervous to do it. And it's so interesting to me, I want to share a quick anecdote. I'm doing a webinar tomorrow on referrals, and the person who is hosting the webinar actually reached out to me, an old friend of mine, reached out to me because he himself was having trouble getting referrals. He was nervous about getting referrals himself. And he is one of the most kind-hearted, charismatic, thoughtful salespeople that I have ever worked with, sales leaders I've ever worked with. And he himself was nervous about it and was like, I feel like I'm just like missing something here. Why don't we talk about it and we'll share our conversation. And then a friend of mine, Kevin Walkup, who's the top salesperson at SalesLoft, is joining as well, who's been a pioneer for referrals for a while. But to get your perspective, I mean, this is something that so well, and you're one of the leading authorities on. How do I overcome that concern? And in what mindset should I think about referrals when I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the customer, right? If someone asked me for a referral, why would I say yes? What does that mean? Can we talk about that briefly?
Well, there's a couple things. So the fear of asking is huge. And it's a behavior change. Remember, we said referral selling is a skill. So when you learn the right way to ask, which is a series of building blocks, being able to communicate the business results, who you want to meet, and then how to put that all together and how to ask. And then you need to practice like any skill. You have to practice to get good at it. It doesn't just happen. And it's a human factor, this fear of asking, because it's so personal. And the fear is, it feels pushy. It feels like a favor. What if they say no? I mean, it's all this personal stuff. Mm-hmm. But we get over that when they build the skills, practice, and shift their behavior. That's how you get past that. And so it's no longer I'm asking for a favor. It's because you're not. It's no longer, it's weak to ask for help. It's no longer I'm afraid they'll say no, because they won't. But it doesn't just happen. And this is something that occurs a lot, that sales leaders think, I just tell my people to go get referrals. Well, it doesn't work. And they know it doesn't work now because they've done that for years and it's not working, right? So it is a specific skill that has to be learned and practiced. It's how we get good at anything, right? And I love every 2 years when I can talk about the Olympics, because you look at these superstar athletes, they didn't get where they are today by doing a downhill or a slalom once. Oh my gosh. That was their life and their training, and how many coaches they had, not one, not two, not with all different coaches. And we do that even in our personal lives, but in our professional lives, we don't think of it the same way. So that's how you get over all of that. It doesn't just happen.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it, Joanne. I think the concept that you can one day wake up and just get referrals is as asinine as the concept that one day you can just take a random person off the street and they can be good at cold calling. We have invested so much in training SDRs and in training people how to be more effective at outreach. And we've invested so little in how good our people could be at getting referrals. Even though we know that at its best, cold outreach is infinitesimally as effective, right, as getting referrals. We all know, every sales leader knows that getting a referral from one of your customers or from one of your partners or from someone in your network is so much better than cold outreach. Every CEO knows getting an intro to a VC is so much better than doing cold outreach. Every PR person knows that getting an intro to a journalist is so much better than getting cold outreach, right? We all know that this is the case in every aspect of the world. And yet, here we emphasize and preach and teach how to do cold outreach, knowing it is a less effective medium than it is to get referrals. And I find that to be somewhat of an exercise in insanity.
I'll give you, just to close out here, I had a conversation about this on LinkedIn because I posted an update.
Okay.
And the question I asked was, why do sales leaders invest in technology so readily, but they don't invest in the professional development of their people? And there was a really robust conversation, but one person said this: if a sales leader invests in technology and the technology doesn't work, they blame the technology. But if the sales leader invests in professional development for their team and it doesn't work, they're at fault. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but it is way more personal. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of reasons, and you've nailed it. It's a dilemma, and we need to shift that, because referral selling is our biggest competitive differentiation. We get in there we're having conversations, building relationships, closing deals, while everybody else is spending 8 to 15 touches to try to reach people.
That's right. And again, and I couldn't agree more, Joanne. The thing that we have seen on Bravado is that the close rate for referrals. So this is using a less robust version of what you have developed, but we have a very simplified version of salespeople being able to get referrals. The close rate of referrals of a referral is over 25%. The meeting rate is over 85%. And the reason why I bring those numbers up is because there has never been any other program that I have ever run as a sales leader that had an 85% meeting rate and a 25% close rate. I know you get numbers that are even more effective than that. Joanne, if our viewers and listeners here want to get in touch with you in order to learn more about your program, No More Cold Calling, and learn more about referral-based selling and getting their teams trained, what's the best way for them to find you and reach out to you?
Well, I love to talk to people, so I'll start with my phone number. Which is area code 415-461-8763. It's my office, and that's Pacific time, 415-461-8763. And feel free to email me, Joanne, Joanne, at nomorecoldcalling.com. And you can also go to my website, nomorecoldcalling.com, and get lots of information there. So welcome everybody to do that. I always share best practices and insights.
Perfect. And you've shared a ton today. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for being a guest on The Future of Sales.
You bet. Bye for now.